I'm going to do a replay analysis of the Epicenter Grand Final. The winner of this best of 5 got $500,000 and I'm going to be focusing mainly on team fights, and there's just so much information that tends to happen with a team fight, and just watching it back in a replay and even in slow motion you'll probably learn a lot from it. If you enjoy this type of video, please tell me down in the comments. So first, to start things off, we're going to look at game 1. So Night Stalker has just used his ultimate, and if we look at the vision on each side, we have to play this. So on Radiant side, it's all dark. You have no wards in the jungle, and if we look at the Dire side, they have an observer ward here and they have another one up here. So what's happening is that they're able to control pretty much most of the high ground of the enemy jungle. This is just very good vision advantage for them right now. And you can see that Radiant is farming the other side of the map, and they're even farming up here as well. So Bane is bottom, and instantly there's going to be TP rotations when they dive. This is a pretty standard thing just to TP in, but one important thing is the fact that everyone is TPing at different positions to the tower, and we'll see Miracle TPs up here on his Invoker. So this is again another position. So now after getting that kill, they're heading back, but LGD are quite smart and they know that they can turn this. They've pretty much massive out levels at this point in the game. So level 10, level 10, level 8, you've level 6, level 8, level 6. Now what they also know is that Invoker teleported up here. Windranger's in a really good position. Essentially what starts to happen is that they're getting focused down one by one, and the position of this Morphling, he's moving downwards, and what he was trying to do was get a waveform that would go across this direction, so that he could hit waveform onto multiple units and then escape out this direction, but it didn't necessarily happen the way that he wanted it to. So he managed to do an incredibly good play there of cancelling the Epicenter. It's a really small thing, but more so the fact that he knew that the Sand King was channeling Epicenter. He was in Sandstorm at the time, so he didn't know he was actually channeling it. It was a prediction play. And meanwhile, at the same time, Windranger managed to get a shackle shot and Invoker before he could even use his Chaos Meteor, which is pretty much most of his damage at this point of the game. And he has a Sunstrike as well, which is doing most of the damage. And at this point as well, he pretty much has gone invis. And a lot of the time what Windranger would do here is shackle onto the tree and then use the power shot, because you get an easy power shot hit. But the fact that this Windranger build is very heavy on damage with right clicks, Focus Fire does a lot of damage, and the Invoker is going to go invis, and the only way to do extra damage, the maximum possible damage, is to hit power shot while he goes invisible. So they pretty much dived the high ground, and he switched back to the Sand King mode, obviously just trying to get the stun off, but he has nowhere near enough mana, and they pretty much get an entire team wipe here. And that wasn't anything really impressive, but more so about the fact that they understood that they could dive the tower. Even though it's 15 minutes, they're diving at tier 3, which is pretty much taking advantage of their levels and their heroes. Windranger's Windrun can dive under tower. You have a Vanguard Night Stalker, which has pretty much really high armor as well, so it's really easy for them to dive towers with their hero. And overall, that was a really good exchange for using the Darkness ultimate. So now moving on to the next clip, and what the Radiant side is trying to do is push down middle tower, and they're doing this because they have a Drow Ranger on their team, and Invoker is pretty strong at this point as well. They have really good tower hitting, and they've caught up on levels at this point as well. So if we just pause right here, what's really important is their positioning. So you can see Sand King is up here, Bane is here, Drow is here, you have Disruptor in the trees over here, and Invokers over here. See how split out they are? This means that it's really hard for them to get hit by AoE spells. Even though the enemy don't really have these AoE spells, it's more so about trying to catch them, because each of these heroes has a way of stopping or interrupting. He has a stun, he has multiple ways of disrupting them. You have glimpse and static field, and you have invokers, just lots of crowd control. But the other thing that they're scared of right now is also smoke, so they don't know what direction the enemy team is going to come in. They can see Morphling down here, and that's pretty much it, but they don't know, are they going to come from this side and smoke across? And the idea is that they're just pushing this tower, and really Dyer isn't really responding, and they're trying to find someone out of position, and they did so straight away with this observer ward here. The Sand King is hiding in the fog of war behind the trees, and they pretty much kill Skyra, and instantly it's a 4v5. They take this tower, and it allows them to go high ground without any problems. Now what they're also doing here is, with the Forged Spirits and Drow Ranger illusions, they're able to do a lot of damage to this tower. And why they're doing this is because the enemy team don't have, as I said earlier, good AoE clear or any sort of AoE spells that do damage, and it's hard for them to actually kill these Forged Spirits, so they're relying on Wind Ranger's power shot pretty much to do most of it. As you see now, your silence, essentially what they're doing is constantly stalling. You're using Nightmare, you're holding this guy into position, and he pretty much dies again, and that's all that's really happening. They're just stalling this out. They don't really want to fight. They're just pretty much able to hit towers and take objectives pretty hard. Night Stalker is forced to buy back. Wind Ranger did a blink shackle shot, and this is really important. It doesn't really seem like much, but when you're up on high ground, there's very few trees. You have 2 trees here, and you have like all the trees are like kind of away. It's similar to Timbersaw. He has a hard time pushing up onto the high ground because there's not enough trees available. So the only chance that Wind Ranger has is to get a shackle onto a unit, and it's typically hard to, it's just really important to do this. And in general, like, Wind Ranger relies very heavily on like holding someone in position to be able to do damage with her focus fire or her power shot, because again, like, players can dodge her power shot if you're able to do that, which you would expect of what pro players are doing. So pretty much here you have Bane, who's out of position, and like he's like pretty much been held there, and what he does instantly is use his Glimmer Cape, and this blocks nearly all the damage of Finger. So Finger is level 2. That was a level 2 Finger, and it did barely anything. And by having this like position, like, the positioning isn't great here, but what you do see is Miracle just instantly blinking in massive aggressiveness, which seems pretty stupid, but it works out really well because of the fact that he's Black King Bar. Wind Ranger in general is, any sort of crowd control really makes it difficult for her. The fact that she's now stunned and she's in what you call ice wall, she has pretty much nowhere to escape to, and she's taking massive magical damage, and it is pretty much her weakness. At this point as well, you're pretty much seeing like Drow is committing a little bit too far up. So the only interesting thing that's left on this clip is the fact that Disruptor used his static field, and the idea of this is so that the enemy won't chase him, and he hopefully just wants to escape. Now he's TPing away, but they managed to get him anyways. But what's interesting here now is what Miracle does on Invoker, is that he gets a DD rune, his whole team is dead. Why is he going back in? So what he does is he stands up on high ground with Forged Spirits, and he's pretty much waiting for a support to come along here. And if a support doesn't come, he's just going to ghost walk and run away, or he can just blink and run away. Now the thing is, no support ends up coming, but what he does end up seeing is Lion showing in lane to farm. He doesn't expect anyone is going to go on him at this point, and Invoker sends his Forged Spirits down with Alacrity, and he pretty much does this really cool combo with like Tornado then into Sunstrike. And the reason why he's able to do this is not necessarily because he had a DD rune, but more so about the fact that the supports had split up, and he's pretty much way out leveling the support. He's level 20 and the support is level 12. So now moving on to game 2. So first off, we're going to look at what this Clockwork is doing. So he showed in lane as level 4, but what he has is a Tome of Knowledge coming. It brings him up to level 6, exactly to level 6, just about. He perfectly timed it. So what he does is he wraps around this direction, as you'll see. Dyer have vision here of him walking across the ground, so he didn't smoke up or anything. So like, if you didn't have a ward here, this Invoker would know what to do. You can see the positioning of the Invoker right now. He's moving away from this Clockwork, and this isn't like any like particular good positioning, but what he is doing is he's making it hard for the Clockwork to hit its hookshot, because the range on level 1 is not that good. So at this point, what the Clockwork should be doing is essentially backing out, and they shouldn't be fighting, because this is a pretty essential like way of starting their fights at this point in the game. There's 4 heroes on dire side mid, and they're pretty much trying to push down this tower as it looks of it if you were from the Radiant side. A really good Sunstrike there, which was, I assume, like a bit of a prediction, but you have Spirit Breaker coming in. He's not necessarily targeting the highest health hero, but what he is doing is targeting a hero that is going to, like Clockwork might have been sitting back here in the trees, and it's kind of predicting which heroes are going to be at the back of the fight so you can stun multiple heroes. Skyrat's ultimate didn't really do an enormous amount of damage or get a kill, and the Beastmaster Roar was really just used defensively and it didn't get a kill. You can't see it right now, but Dead Prophet is using her ultimate. The particles are not showing up properly. You can see them like kind of there. But Dead Prophet is melting really hard to just overall damage. If they didn't react to that, this tower would have just died. You see how little damage that this tower took? They've used their glyph, and Dead Prophet has no ultimate, so they literally just push down this tower. And it's taking advantage of the fact that the enemy team really can't fight at this point in the game. Clockwork managed to hit a hook onto a Spirit Breaker in mid-charge, which is really impressive. Spirit Breaker dies, and he can't use his ultimate because the battery assault essentially keeps stopping it. Meanwhile, Lifestealer is infested here, and in general, like, this doesn't really seem like much, but when he roared and Lifestealer came out of him, that meant that they couldn't just go on Doom. When he roars, that's the point of when, like, Doom is stunned, that's when you want to attack him and start doing damage. But with the fact that Lifestealer is now raged, he's magic immune, he does an enormous amount of damage during this point in the fight, and if you commit to fighting this, he can also use open wounds and slow you very heavily. So they pretty much have to back off, and that's pretty much the right choice to do. Now the bad thing about this is that he decides to TP away this Beastmaster, and this is actually a really bad idea where he TP'd, because you're wasting an 80-second cooldown on a TP, and it doesn't really seem like much, but more so the fact that in the most recent, like, older patches it was 60 seconds, but you can't just casually waste your TP like that. Now here's where something gets really interesting, is how Invoker uses his Ice Wall. It goes along this direction and blocks the path for Dead Prophet. It doesn't seem like much, and what Dead Prophet ends up doing there, which was also really skillful, was using a silence on multiple heroes at the same time. She hit 3 heroes, and one of which was Spirit Breaker in the middle of his charge. So we'll look at this again. Spirit Breaker's charging, and you get the silence on Spirit Breaker mid-charge, so he doesn't actually hit this Clockwork, which he was initially charging. One thing that I just missed there was that the placement of the ice wall that I mentioned was along here, and Dead Prophet was being slowed very heavily, and she couldn't move in and do damage with her exorcism because it's kind of like AoE around her. This meant that Invoker had an easy chance to back up, and a couple of other heroes on his team as well. Now on top of this, Dead Prophet has got doomed, which doesn't really seem like a great time to doom her, but it's more so the fact that she is the main target of doom in this match against their draft. It's probably the best hero to use it on, and she can't continue using up her Crypt Swarm, which is a lot of how she's going to do incremental damage, and she also can't Euls herself. And that's an important thing as well, is that when she has her exorcism Euls herself, you can't do damage to her, but she can do damage to you. Now they're pretty much fighting in here, and Radiant do an incredibly good job just all survive on really low health and take down the Dead Prophet. That's more so understanding how much damage your hero can take and how far you can push your hero to the limit. So this is why it's also important to kind of practice your heroes a lot, is so that you know how you can stick around in team fights as long as possible without like escaping with very little health. Now there's a lot you can take away from these replays, but another thing I want to know is, are you going to buy the Battle Pass? Because I know I am, but I want to get a general idea of how many people are actually buying it or not going to get it.